My wife has been dead for 734 days, and she just ordered a frozen margarita on the Lido deck, with another man's hand resting heavily on her bare thigh. I knew the exact number of days because after she died, counting was the only thing I had the energy left to do. Her name was Emily. 2 years ago, the county police knocked on my front door at 3 in the morning and told me she drowned. They said she was driving home from her corporate accounting job late, took the winding back road by the reservoir exactly like she always did to avoid highway traffic, and her car smashed through the rusted metal guardrail. They found the submerged sedan. They found one of her work shoes washed up on the rocky bank. They never found her body. The police divers searched the dark water for 9 straight days before they finally called it off. The county mailed me a piece of paper that said, "Presumed drowned." I took a job as a roaming photographer on commercial cruise ships because I physically could not stand being inside our house anymore. Every single room smelled like her vanilla shampoo, and the silence was suffocating. My new job was entirely mindless. I walked around crowded pool decks with a heavy camera around my neck, taking overpriced pictures of sunburned tourists wearing fake captain hats. I was in the middle of my afternoon shift when I saw her. She was sitting at a high-top table near the live reggae band. Her hair was dyed a much darker brown, but it was cut in the exact same style. When she smiled, I saw the same tiny gap between her front teeth. When she reached for her drink, the sunlight hit the jagged burn scar on her left wrist from when she touched the hot coil of our toaster oven back in 2019. She was laughing genuinely at something the man sitting next to her said. He was a heavily built guy with a strict buzz cut, maybe 50 years old, wearing a thick gold wedding band. Her left hand had a diamond ring on it too. It was absolutely not the one I saved up for a year to buy her. My first thought was not a wave of cinematic relief that she was miraculously alive. My first thought was a wave of pure, toxic betrayal. I followed them from a distance for 3 hours. I radioed my shift manager and told him I was going to throw up and needed to be off the floor. I shadowed them through the buffet line. I watched them get ice cream cones. I stood behind a row of slot machines in the casino and watched her rub sunscreen into his wide shoulders exactly the way she used to do for me on our honeymoon. I watched her walk away to the bar, recognizing the very specific, slight limp she got whenever the humidity made her right knee ache. I waited in the crowded atrium until the big guy excused himself to use the public restroom. I walked up behind her chair, stood over her shoulder and said her name. M. She completely froze. Her shoulders instantly shot up toward her ears. That was her involuntary tell whenever she was absolutely terrified. She slowly turned around in her chair, and the moment she looked at my face, I saw it in her eyes. She knew exactly who I was, and in half a second she made the active decision to erase me. "I think you have the wrong person," she said, offering a tight, polite smile. "My name is Lauren." It was her voice, but she pitched it slightly higher. She used to do that exact same voice when she was telling a ridiculous lie as a joke at dinner parties. "Your left wrist," I said, my chest tight and burning. "You burned it on the toaster oven. You dropped the bread and screamed the F word right in front of Lila, and then you spent 20 minutes trying to convince our daughter it was just a Spanish word for toast." She stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the deck and tipped backward onto the floor. She did not reach out to touch me. She took a step back, her eyes wide and panicked. "Please, just leave me alone," she whispered quickly. The big guy walked out of the restroom crowd. He saw me standing in her personal space. He did not yell or make a massive scene. He just walked up quickly, placed a heavy, calloused hand flat against my chest, and pushed me backward with enough force to let me know he could hurt me. "Sir," she said to leave her alone, he said quietly. "You need to turn around and walk away right now." I looked at him and pointed at her. "That is my dead wife." He stared at my face. His expression completely changed. The aggressive anger dropped, replaced by a cold, terrifying calculation. "What is your name?" he asked. "Daniel Foster," I said. He looked around the crowded atrium, grabbed me by the upper arm and told me to come with him. He did not take me to ship security. He dragged me through a heavy metal door into a restricted crew hallway that smelled like bleach and engine grease, entirely away from the passengers. He pulled a leather wallet from his back pocket and flashed a heavy metal badge. United States Marshals Service. He told me his name was Harris, and he told me the woman sitting out there was a federal witness under his protection. Emily did not drown in the reservoir. 6 months before her car went through that guardrail, she discovered that one of her largest corporate accounting clients was aggressively laundering money for a violent syndicate operating out of Cleveland. They were moving $40 million. She made the mistake of telling her boss. Her boss was in on it. They showed up at our house in the middle of the day while I was at work and Lila was at elementary school. They put a gun on the kitchen table and told Emily that if she ever opened her mouth, they would kill our daughter in the school parking lot and make me watch. She went straight to the FBI field office in a complete panic. The federal agents told her the syndicate already had people watching the house. They told her the only way to keep me and Lila breathing was to completely remove the liability. They staged the car accident that same night. They told me she was dead because if I secretly knew she was alive, the syndicate would see it in my face, Harris explained bluntly, standing in the dim fluorescent light. You were completely broken. You stopped going to work. You stopped eating. You acted exactly like a man who lost his wife, which meant the people watching you believed it too. You let me pick out a casket, I said, my voice shaking so hard it cracked. You let me stand in a cemetery and bury an empty wooden box while my daughter cried into my leg. We kept your daughter alive, Daniel, Harris said, showing zero remorse. They put her on this commercial cruise because the primary target she testified against was currently negotiating a plea deal, and they needed to move her out of the country temporarily while they established a brand new identity for her in a different state. Harris was posing as her husband, strictly for travel cover. I asked him if I could just speak to her alone for 5 minutes. He stared at me with dead eyes and told me, absolutely not. He told me if I approached them again, he would have me detained in the ship's holding cell until we docked. At 2 o'clock in the morning, someone knocked softly on the metal door of my tiny crew cabin. I opened it. It was Emily. She was wearing a plain gray sweatshirt. Her dark hair was down, and she was not wearing the fake diamond ring anymore. Her face was completely red, and she was crying ugly, heavy tears. I stepped back and let her inside. The cabin was barely large enough for a twin bed and a sink, and it constantly smelled like mop water. We sat down together on the hard linoleum floor. I have wanted to call you every single day, she whispered, burying her face in her hands. I have written 1,000 letters that I had to burn in the sink. I made a fake Facebook account just so I could watch the video you posted of Lila blowing out her birthday candles last year. I looked at the dark bags under her eyes. I asked her why she didn't just pull me aside the night it happened and tell me we all had to run together. Because you are a terrible liar, Daniel, she said, her voice cracking violently. If you knew I was in a motel room in Cincinnati, you would not have collapsed at the funeral. You would have looked over your shoulder. They would have known. And they would have put a bullet in Lila's head just to make a point. I had to let you hate me dead so that you could live. I reached out and touched the jagged burn scar on her left wrist. The skin was familiar. The pulse underneath it was real. It was really her, sitting on the floor of a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt and stood up. I have to go, she said, her voice shaking. If I stay in this room any longer, Harris will track my keycard deviation. They are still hunting me. If they ever find out that you know I am breathing, you and Lila immediately become leverage again. I looked up at her from the floor. So you just get to be dead twice? She knelt back down and kissed me firmly on the center of my forehead, exactly the way she used to do whenever I was sick with a fever. Go home and take care of our girl, she whispered against my skin. Tell her that her mom was brave once. She stood up, opened the heavy metal door, and walked out into the quiet hallway without looking back. In the morning, I walked up to the guest services desk. The clerk looked at the manifest and told me that Mr. and Mrs. Lauren had formally checked out at the port in Cozumel at 6 in the morning and did not return to the ship. When I went back down to my crew cabin to get ready for my shift, I found a small, unmarked white envelope shoved underneath the crack of my door. Inside the envelope was the original silver wedding band I had bought her 12 years ago. There was no dramatic letter. There was no promise to find me in the future. Just the ring. I still work on commercial cruise ships. I still spend my afternoons walking around crowded pool decks holding a heavy camera. I still count the days. But I finally stopped counting how long my wife has been dead. Now, I just count how long she has been alive somewhere in the world without me. I walked out onto the Lido deck, the bright sun hitting the chlorine water. A large family was standing near the railing, trying to take a selfie. I walked over, lifted my camera, and asked them to squeeze in close together. I adjusted the focus ring, looked through the viewfinder, and told them to smile.